Welcome. Hello, everybody. We're excited to have you all here attending today. I'm Jim Olson, Assistant Executive Director of the National Tile Contractors Association, and we all hope that you and your families are healthy and safe. Today's webinar is titled 5 Proven Tips to Save Time and Money for Tile and Stone Installation. Learning objectives are to identify some of the most common problems associated with installing tile and stone as it relates to installations such as material characteristics and qualities. Consider the importance of mock-ups and testing prior to installation. Know when and why certain tile, stone should be sealed prior to installation and what sealers really do and don't do. Learn the difference between a pre-sealer and grout release. Determine the need for grout rinse water additives to help reduce grouting time and difficulty and ease the installation process. Our sponsor for this presentation is Custom Building Products and Aquamix. Please look for their advertisements in Tile Letter Magazine and multiple NTCA digital platforms. Those of you who have followed the NTCA's webinar series, you know that I have a little business to take care of. Today's webinar will be muted. Please use the questions area on your computer to type in your questions, and we will answer your questions at the end of this presentation. All of our webinars are available to watch at any time on the NTCA YouTube channel shortly after the webinars are presented, and that means within 78 hours we'll have it on the YouTube channel. Please go to the NTCA YouTube channel to subscribe, and you will be notified of all upcoming NTCA videos, including all technical webinars. This will give you easier access to watch all current and past programs at your convenience. We will no longer have them archived on the NTCA website. If the audio on your computer is poor, call the number on your invite. Listen on your phone. All right, here we go. Today's speaker, Rod Sigman, is currently the Custom Tech Sales Specialist for Custom Building Products in the company's Southeast region. Mr. Sigman has worked for the company for the past 31 years in various roles, including Business Development Manager for Technical Installation and Care Systems for Aquamix and Custom Tech. He is responsible for training, education, and all support functions pertaining to national accounts, distribution, agriculture, how about that? Architectural, and contractors for sales department. Mr. Sigman is also responsible for job site inspections, product specifications, product demonstrations, and provides support for product research and development. He currently sits on the NTCA and NSI technical committees and graduated the Ceramic Tile Consultant course in 1995. He also passed the Certified Ceramic Tile Sales Program in 2008 and was certified in 2019 with the designation of Concrete Slab Moisture Testing Technician. Mr. Sigman is also a frequent speaker at many national trade shows, including Coverings, Surfaces, and Total Solutions Plus. Welcome, Rod, and I really look forward to your agricultural presentation.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate that. You know, it will be an interesting presentation if I'm talking agriculture, but let's see if we can weave it in somehow. That'll be a miracle, but let's try it.
I thought I'd just have fun with that. So thank you.
Enjoy it. Appreciate it. Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate taking the time to sit on today's presentation here. And as we jump into the presentation here, we're going to cover obviously a lot of different topics related to how care and maintenance can help with installation of tile and stone, and Jim covered that pretty well in the intro there. And so what I want to start with is this, is in the 31 years that I've been in the industry and working the business side here with the installation materials or on the care and maintenance side, when I talk to contractors especially, this is what comes up a lot of times, is saying, Rod, you know, how can you save me time? And I need to save labor and be more profitable. Can you show me how to make the job quicker? And definitely easier is always good, working smarter, not harder. So definitely we all subscribe to that mentality and hope. And then again, prevent mistakes and oversights that are leading to costly callbacks. One of the things that's never calculated when I talk to people that do run into problems, and we all run into challenges and issues on any job. I mean, again, some are preventable, some are not, but One of the things often I find that most people don't calculate is the time and really the money that goes into these callbacks and meetings and phone calls and 2 or 3 job site meetings out there. So again, that is an actual cost that's never tallied or calculated into most job issues and the overall profitability. So obviously we want to produce a better result, and a happy customer equals referrals, and again, job security. So that's the goal. So again, it sounds great. Everybody subscribes to that, but what I often find is there's a lot of things that are being overlooked when it comes to preventing just the common issues and pitfalls that we all run into on job sites, whether it be tile or stone. You know, and again, here's just kind of a funny, but obviously a very relevant example, you know, here, or analogy, which is, which set would you pick? Now, if you don't golf, probably the picture on the right looks a little more appealing, a little simpler, and, you know, with the 2 clubs there, you know, again, pretty simple. But obviously, if you know how to use a golf club set properly, then you know that all those clubs have a role, and they're used in different applications. Obviously, the 2 on the right are used the most frequently, but if you know how to use all the clubs on the left, you're going to be a much better golfer, right? So again, we understand that, people subscribe to that, but what I really want us to do is ask the question, are we, you know, whatever your job is out there, are we really doing just the same old stuff and trying to simplify things and cutting corners unknowingly or unsuspectingly, or is there things we can do that would be more effective to allow us to utilize different tools and different opportunities to be more profitable in whatever job that you may have that you do today? And so I think all of us could continue to improve if we're being honest. So the first thing we look at in the 5 different ways to be more profitable and save time and be more successful is, number 1 is know your material, right? So, and again, when we talk about natural stone especially, not all stones are the same. So when you look at this chart, look on the left column there with under the type of dimension stone there, and you're going to see a couple different types of marbles. You're going to see 3 different classifications and categories for limestone, which I often point out to people when they talk to me, saying, Rod, I've got limestone. How much sealer? How far is the sealer going to go? How many coats do I need? You know, what are my options? Can I polish this stone? Is that an option? So again, with limestone, it's very important to understand there that, again, we have a type 1, type 2, or type 3, which is low, medium, and high density limestone. And if you look under the absorption or the density as you go to the columns to the right under those different characteristics, you're going to notice that when it comes to natural stone like limestone, you can have an absorption rate of anywhere under 3% or up to 12%. That's a huge variation and a distinction. Again, when you're asking the question, well, how many coats of sealer do I need? Again, how many square feet per gallon is it going to go? That's hard to answer if we don't know what type of limestone. Again, limestone's not all limestone. Some limestones, again, like a low density limestone, simply will not take a polish. You cannot polish a low density limestone. Most medium density limestones will not take a true polish. It may take a patina or some sort of sheen, depending on the type of limestone. But again, those are different characteristics we need to factor in. We're saying, well, what's achievable? What can we do? Or the customer would like to do this, or they would like to only spend this much, or this is how much time we have. How quickly can we get it done? Again, these are all things that are going to relate right back to tell me the type of stone you have and do we know. So this information can be found with most likely your suppliers, the quarriers. For most stones, this is available. Some stones it's not, but again, this is the area we want to start with. Granite can vary quite a bit as well. The different slates, we got 3 different types of limestone, or I'm sorry, not limestone, sandstones and quartzite. So again, some variation that you have there in the material. So we'll get back into this as we go, but again, just notice this chart is very helpful to look at the different characteristics, from water absorption to the compressive strength to the abrasive and abrasion resistance, the C241. So again, refer back to this as a starting point and just to understand where we need to go from here in terms of these questions. Now, under the same category there, know your material. Again, stone is a great material, but it has a lot of inherent characteristics that some people would call flaws. Again, I mean, to me, it's part of what can make it beautiful, but it also honestly can make it challenging, and it can make it costly, obviously, and a lot of headaches. But if we understand this up front, and again, work with each other and work as a team, this is where, again, working in a silo mentality, again, doesn't help any of us. So we have to communicate, talk to each other. If we don't have an answer, there's people I'm sure that each of us know that do have experts and people in these particular categories. So again, just working as a team is great. Now we have to consider, again, as I said, the porosity and absorption. What's the potential for staining? So where is it going to be? Is it a fireplace, wall or hearth, like we see over here on the right? Is it a commercial application? Is it an outside pool deck? Again, what's going to be the potential for staining with different contaminants? Moisture sensitivity. Again, is that going to be an issue or not with these? Some stones are. You can see, again, we've got the efflorescence and iron. The picture on the of the marble on the bottom left, or over in the with the basalt in the middle there, you can see inherent efflorescence within the stone. Again, now some people would say, hey, that could be, if that was in stone, people would say, well, gee, that must be from the grout, or it could be from the mortar or the thin set used, or it's got to be from the mud bed. It's got to be from something other than the stone. A lot of people don't realize that a lot of stones, not all, but many stones have inherent efflorescence or soluble salts within them. And that's a great example. That was just taking the stone, put it in a bucket of water, pulling it out and letting it dry. And again, that was very easy to tell that the stone had inherent soluble salts. With the marble there, you can see 3 pieces of cut marble on that job on the floor. And only those 3 pieces in that entire job actually stained with the iron. They had soluble iron in it. Why? Again, it's a luck of the draw. But those are 3 cut pieces. When you cut, you have water. Again, water triggers efflorescence. Water will trigger soluble iron sulfide. So again, do we know the stone? Do we know the potential? The picture on the far right, again, is a fireplace where they did not pre-seal, by the way. So the staining that you see is actually from the grout. They did not pre-test or do a mock-up, and they just assumed, well, it's kind of complementary, so, hopefully it works. And so those particular pieces, again, not all pieces of stone are the same, and they don't accept it or take the pigment or the potential for staining the same. So that's what it looked like after it cured out and dried. It did not dry. That's not moisture. That's actual staining. And again, only certain pieces did it, but that's a problem. That's not something that's going to be easily rectified. In most cases there, by the time you fix it, it's cheaper to rip that out and replace it, unfortunately. So these are, again, very timely, very costly mistakes for saying, gee, I didn't know. I didn't realize you could seal the stone before grouting, or that we should look for and ask the supplier if that stone may potentially have soluble iron or soluble salts like efflorescence inherent within the material. Is the stone going to warp? And what is the potential for etching, a freeze thaw? Is it suitable for different climates where that could be an issue? Again, some limestones or some sandstones work great in freeze thaw. Others will completely blow apart, spall, and deteriorate just within the first few freeze thaw cycles. So again, there's no right or wrong answer as far as, or not right or wrong, but there's no one answer that says all limestones are going to fail in freeze thaw, or all limestones are successful in a freeze thaw. It's a matter of testing, talking, and working together and finding these answers out. But again, considering these before the job occurs. So let's talk a little bit about tile. So not all stone is the same. Well, again, not all tile is the same as well. And that's not, again, to say there's any bad material necessarily, other than to say that, again, all materials aren't always created equal. Here we have first we had a natural material. Here we have a man-made material. And again, not all factories produce the material the same. And again, so porosity, absorption, potential for staining, a lot of those things come into play as well. This is just a picture here I took of an uninstalled piece of unglazed, unpolished matte porcelain. And what you see on there is what happens when you wet that porcelain out with just water. So you can imagine it looks like I'm putting a color enhancer on the porcelain tile. There's that much absorption. So imagine if that's just water, now that'll dry out. What if that was oil? What if it was coffee at a dealership? What if it was different contaminants in a lobby or some other commercial application? What's going to happen when we grout it? Especially again, like we've seen with stone, if you were to grout that material right there without pre-sealing it or using a grout release, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, I would tell you that that's going to stain quite readily as well. So again, these are all things that are very simple, easily addressed, but oftentimes they're just simply overlooked for time or just the fact that maybe, we never had a problem with unglazed, unpolished porcelain. Well, again, they're not all created equal. So ANSI and the Porcelain Tile Certification Agency, the PTCA, and again, ISO 13006, they all will define porcelain. They have a definition, which one of the key designations is going to be the absorption of 0.5% absorption rate or less to be considered a true porcelain tile. Now, even having said that, does that mean if it's 0.5% or let's say 0.3% that it won't stain? That does not mean that. There's a lot of things that go into it. We'll talk about in a second with different materials. But the NTCA reference manual has some great language in Chapter 9 specifically under the care and maintenance section that addresses some of the stuff that we're talking about today. So again, use that as a resource for you. It's a fantastic manual and a document that was really there to help provide the assistance to avoid these common pitfalls. So polished or unpolished, glazed or unglazed, again, do we know what we're dealing with? Do we know what it's porcelain tile, but do we know what the characteristics are? So here, again, polished on top, unglazed, unpolished on the bottom. That's coffee on the bottom picture there, and on top, that's an oil stain, just as I said a minute ago. Again, have we looked at this? Have we tested it with the contaminants likely to the job? Well, on the picture on the top is an uninstalled piece. I can tell you that was tested because of what I'm saying today. And it was like, wow, I'm glad we looked at that before we went too much further. Now, again, does that mean that's bad tile? That's not bad tile at all. It just simply means, as I said before, by the way, that tile there has a 0.2% absorption rate. So it falls within the technical definition of a true porcelain. Again, as I said before, by the way, if you look back at that chart, anybody that may have looked at the marble or granite closely, with granite marble, you're talking about a ASTM definition of 0.2 or 0.3% for granite or marble. Here we're talking at 0.2% per tile, and most people would say, well, sure, you need to seal marble. Well, this porcelain tile is in the same technical range in terms of absorption as the granite and marble. So again, I say that because people don't correlate that necessarily, saying, well, I understand why you need to seal natural stone, but if a tile happens to fall in that same range, that's why I'm submitting these pictures to you. Again, this is not bad material, but this simply means a sealer in this case is going to greatly help address this. So we need the right sealer. We need to talk through this, test it out, vet it out further, and then again, proceed from there. So know the material, absolutely key. So what we have here is a little bit more definition. I'll try to keep this simple. So this was taken from a PhD scientist in Australia that did an extensive test as to why do some polished, unglazed porcelain stain and others don't. And simply put, it comes down to the manufacturing process. So what we're showing here is simply that they did a test where they removed 0.5 millimeter of the surface when they polished, they removed 1 millimeter, and they removed 1.5 millimeters when the material is polished. So these are all polished, unglazed porcelains. And what they're showing here is the potential for staining. And you'll notice on the very top right, the one that has the highest potential for staining is the material that they only removed 0.5 millimeter. What they're showing you is the more stock of tile that's removed during the polishing process, the less potential it has for staining. Simply put, it's because when you polish a porcelain tile, you are opening the body of it And right at the surface, when it vitrified going through the firing in the kiln, there's air pockets and gas bubbles that are trapped right under the surface when it fully vitrifies. So if you remove more stock, you're removing all of those little pinholes that got trapped just underneath the surface. That is what will either cause or lead to grout staining and staining in general. But if you remove 1.5 millimeters of material, the potential for staining, in other words, removing all of those pinholes and pores, is dramatically reduced to where, again, those are the tiles you typically run across saying, wow, I don't have an issue at all with grout staining or staining at all with porcelain. That's the difference. So again, without going too technical, hopefully that makes sense, but that's why it's important to understand that this is not good or bad material or good or bad manufacturing. This is just explaining why you may or may not have had issues or may not have issues in the future if you just assume that you should never seal unglazed porcelain or that you should always have to seal unglazed porcelain. So if you have to, great, but I'm also a believer that if you don't have to seal it, I would absolutely agree with that. Save time, save money, don't seal it. Don't use a grout release. But unless you know that answer, again, it's important to understand and vet that out for yourself. So number 2, mock-ups and testing. Again, sounds great. Is it always possible? No. So I'm not sitting here trying to say, I live in some euphoric utopia that I don't understand why every job doesn't have a mock-up. But again, if and when possible, especially if you've never used the material before, whether it's tile or stone, if it's in an application you're not familiar with, if you're using different materials associated with it you've never used, again, and under conditions, environmental conditions on the job site. So every job is different to some degree. So have we done a mock-up? Have we tested it out? So, and again, the picture on the right is if you see on the limestone there, that's some Texas Looters limestone, color enhanced in the middle. What are the darker pieces? Those are color enhanced. Now you notice the piece that's cut on the very edge next to the wood mock-up didn't take the enhancer as dark. It didn't take it the same. Well, that's not unusual. Now, is that an issue for the owner? Maybe, maybe not. It's a question we want to answer in the mock-up. Do they like that? Do they want the natural look? Do they want the enhanced look? There's no right or wrong answer, but if they're going to do just one piece and assume that every piece looks like the larger piece and it's all going to be some monolithic, monotone, darker look, that's just simply not going to be the case with that stone. So again, we don't want to end up with finger pointing and issues down the road of saying, well, I didn't know, you didn't tell me. Again, that's where these kind of mock-ups are fantastic. So again, you don't have to go this extensive, but I just love the concept because again, a lot of these problems we see can be absolutely avoided. So here we see some tile. So let's go to, again, tile. Picture on the left actually comes from the TCNA, and it's a piece of unglazed, unpolished porcelain. And some would assume that the right half of that tile is color enhanced. It's not, it's epoxy grout. That's what happens when, if you were to use epoxy grout of a certain color, a similar color on that tile and not pre-seal it, it will stain. It will act like a color enhancer, which to me is not unusual, but that's my background. So a lot of people would say, wow, I didn't realize that. So, I mean, if you did the whole job, maybe somebody wouldn't notice and it would just look 3 shades darker. But if the customer were to then take and you think everything's clear and free, and the customer takes an uninstalled piece of tile, puts it down on the floor and says, I didn't think it was that dark. What happened? I've seen that happen. And that becomes a very big problem where it ultimately, in this case, would end up in a rip out and replace. Picture on the right is, again, some limestone here. And what I did here was pre-sealed the right half with a color enhancing seal. And what I like about this picture is, and then I grouted it with I just put some cement grout on top of it to simulate just, what happens. Notice on the grout on the right side where I put the color enhancing seal, notice the color difference. It's still dark and it still looks wet. which is what you want it to be. Notice on the right, now by the way, I took this picture within minutes after putting grout on the face. Notice on the left side, it's getting lighter. Why, Bill? Because the moisture is being pulled out of the grout right into the stone. So it's setting up quicker. And that's not a good thing, right? It's not a good thing from a variety of standpoints, but in terms of working time, that's one of the complaints I always hear is going, wow, I just don't have as much working time as I need or as I would like with this material. Well, pre-sealing it not only addresses the issue of potential for staining, but it also allows you as an installer to have that working time, that open time to work with the materials and get the coverage, get the ease. I can't demonstrate that in a picture, but the ease of grouting a pre-sealed surface is so much nicer. Again, trying to just take that float and put it on the stone, I could feel it grabbing. It just literally, the moisture being sucked right out of it. This is a low density limestone. So going back to that, so we're probably up in the 8, 9, 10% absorption rate at least with this stone. It's just pulling the moisture out. So it's stiff. I mean, it's hard to, it would be hard to grout that stone without pre-sealing it. So again, something to look at. Now, here's that same piece. Now, notice on the right where I use the color enhancer, we don't have an issue with that. But on the left, you know, you see in the middle there, what I had done there before is I'd taken some tape on there and pre-treated that before. And so notice on the left, the darker area. That's what happens. Now, it didn't stain it a lot, but what happened with that is the grout actually did stain and darken the stone. Now, it's not very obvious until you do, again, like I said, until somebody does this and they start putting the stone down on the floor saying, that doesn't match. Why does it look darker than the material was supposed to look like? So again, initially without that piece on the floor, you would look and say, well, that's a nice average looking floor. But when the owner takes a piece of stone and puts it on the floor and says, that's a lot darker than it should be, it's typically due to the fact it was never pre-sealed and you actually have a degree of staining going on in the stone. It's just most people would never associate and pick that up. But until somebody does this, and now we got a problem because you're not getting that out of the stone. You either have to have somebody professionally grind it and hope for the best, a stone restoration company, or that's a rip out and replace in a worst case scenario. So again, under mock-ups and testing, again, situation here took two different, obviously strong contrasting colors with a low density limestone and put that on there. Half of it was sealed, as you can see on the right, and half of it wasn't. So again, you can see the difference. So what difference does pre-sealing make? Well, like I said, it gives you more working time with the grout. It makes it a lot quicker and easier to do the grouting, but it also, more importantly, stops the staining issues that I'm talking about right now. So again, just a simple, quick, easy test that can be done very quickly, inexpensively to say, what is the potential for staining with the materials I'm using? Again, now notice, I will point out on the picture on the right, now you can see where the grout smears were of each color, right? But again, like I said, notice that when I cleaned it off, the stone itself, like I said, still got darker from just the wash water, the rinse water. The grout I let sit on there for the 15 to 20 minutes the manufacturer recommended, but just when I came back and washed it off, obviously automatically just that dirty wash water also stained the stone. So again, this is hard to avoid and becomes very costly and expensive if we don't calculate and factor it in. So let's get to number 3, pre-grouting, sealing the stone. So pre-grouting sealing just simply means you want to take the same sealer that's going to be used on the stone or the tile after grouting, use that same sealer before grouting. That's what we call pre-grouting sealing or pre-sealer. There's different terminologies used, but what you don't want to do is use the cheapest inexpensive sealer you can find to pre-seal, even if it works, and then try to come back with a color enhancing sealer. It doesn't work well. I'll show you that in a minute, but bottom line is whatever sealer is going to be used, water-based, solvent-based, natural look, color enhancing, whatever sealer, topical sealer, Whatever material is going to be used for that job afterwards, use that same sealer if you need to pre-seal it for the reasons we've just covered. Use that same exact sealer before grouting. All right. So obviously for the more porous tile or stone, we've talked about that. And again, where a contrasting grout color is used. So here's two different pictures of color enhancing sealing being done beforehand. What I just said a minute ago, so here's what you don't want to do is pre-seal or not pre-seal and then go back with a color enhancing sealer. I don't see this, I mean, it's not seen all the time, obviously, but it's not unusual for me to see or hear this type of issue from, I don't care, from Florida to California and, Canada to the Bahamas, it doesn't matter. I've seen and heard it all with different materials, slate being one of the common ones, but like I show here on the picture of the granite, this can happen too. So the question is, well, what is this? Well, this is simply not pre-sealing. And with our cementitious grouts, virtually everybody's out there is a polymer modified grout. So when you go ahead and you grout the material, the stones are porous, and what happens is the stone has a potential for wicking or absorbing that polymer, not just the moisture, but the polymer from the joint into the stone. Now you don't see that, it's not evident, you can't tell that happens, and if and until you put a color enhancing sealer on it and say, wow, why are the edges not darkening? Well, they're not darkening because there used to be moisture there that contained polymer from the joints in the grout. And in essence, it becomes a sealer. And so the sealer is not going to discriminate between the edge and the body of the stone. I mean, people will say, well, the sealer is failing. Well, the sealer doesn't indiscriminately fail like that. It enhances what it can absorb into. And if it can't absorb into the edges of some of these pieces of stone, and again, notice it's not every piece of stone on the slate and not every edge, again, speaking to the variation and the potential for each material or the color. But again, at that point, these are rip out replaces. That's a 3,000 square foot residential slate job, and that was about a 5,000 foot commercial granite job. You cannot fix those. Those are all rip out and replace, and that becomes a very expensive lesson to what we're doing here today, which is why, again, I always say thank you for being here today, because this is what, this is why I enjoy doing this. I don't enjoy being on those jobs. Because it's going to cost somebody reputation, it's going to cost them money, it's going to cost them time. It's an ugly situation, and it's very much preventable with education and learning like we're doing today. So just want to throw that out there. Like I said, it doesn't always happen. It's not too common, but it's also not unheard of either for this to happen. So again, picture on the left, again, it's a different stone here, not pre-sealed, and now we've got staining and wicking of the grout into the bleeding into the stone. Again, that's going to be rip out and replace. That's not going away. That's not moisture in that picture. That sometimes it is. In that case, it's not. That's a rip out and replace. Picture on the right. Those guys there said, we've heard of it. It's not our first rodeo. Been there, done it. We're going to pre-seal it with the appropriate sealer. We're all going to talk, work together. It's factored into the bid. And it's all bought off and understood by everybody involved on that project. And that was a multi-building campus in Southern California. Everything came out exactly the way it should, on time, on budget, and everybody from the owner to architect and everyone involved, everybody's happy. Everybody got paid, and the job was done once. It's kind of everybody's dream, right? So again, but that's very much what's doable and what should happen when these type of issues are employed and understood. So does it really work? Again, on the picture on the left, sure it works, but it doesn't work if you just take a sponge brush and just seal the edges of the stone and then spread grout over the face of the stone. It worked, but only where they sealed it around the edge. So again, we also have to employ the right techniques. It's not just, well, hey, we did pre-seal the stone. Well, did you pre-seal the entire face of the stone, not just the edges, if you're going to spread grout over the entire face of the job? So again, the sealer works. It just got to be done right and considered, as odd as that may sound. So picture on the right is a job. It's a limestone job. And, through an unfortunate problem. What I like showing here is again, the answer to the question, does it really work? Sure, it works. So what is that dark line in the middle? Well, what happened there was they did pre-seal it and realized, hey, this works great. It helps everything that we had talked about. This is great, fantastic. They had a guy on the left with a roller rolling up to a certain line, and then the guy on the left rolling up to a line, and they missed it by a row. So again, did the sealer work? Sure it did. It didn't work. Now you can see what would have happened to the stone. By the way, that was a modified epoxy grout on that job. Okay. So what's the dark? That's actually what the grout did to the stone. That, again, that's not moisture. That is actual staining of the grout in the stone with a modified epoxy. That's not coming out. That is a rip out that entire row and replace it. Now, could be worse, could be the whole job. But again, you could imagine if they did not pre-seal that, that's what the whole job would have looked like, is a color enhanced stone, and that would have not flown anyways with the owner. So does it work? Sure it works. But also, I always say communication. Mark it, tape it. There's different ways you can, do that, to where you say, hey, let's make sure if we're, you're on the left, I'm on the right, we get to the right row. But again, unfortunately, we just missed it by a row. So, but it was fixed, not as expensive as it could have been, but nonetheless, an easily avoidable situation. Shopping mall here. This mall here was done and sealed in 2007. And when I went to the job in 2017, I've been in this job more than that, but the last time I went was 2017, because I like to walk this job myself. Just again, the question is, does it work? Does pre-sealing and sealing the stone work? The answer is pretty good. Now, this is a high density limestone. It's Egyptian limestone, 170,000 square feet in a shopping mall. Now, most people would cringe and go, are you crazy? It's bold. I love stone. And it is a bold move, but it's a great stone. Again, they use the right type of limestone. And again, the beauty shot in 2007, great. But what does it look like 10 years later? That's what it looked like. Now, by the way, that's Starbucks right there at the base of the escalators. And so do you think people spill coffee around there? Of course they do. Mrs. Field cookies and Ben and Jerry's ice cream and whatnot. When I walked the mall, there was not a stain in it in anywhere in the mall that I walked around there, including the food court area. That's not only a testament, by the way, to the sealing of the job and having it done right and following all the things that we've talked about, but it's also a testament to the maintenance program. Without the proper maintenance program, it wouldn't have lasted anywhere near 10 years. Maintenance is a critical aspect of ensuring that the stone and the sealer function the way they should and what they're meant to do. So just a side note on that. So what's going on here? Again, tile, quarry tile in a service bay. Again, natural stone, it doesn't matter what's going on, job's done right. Everybody got paid, like I said before. This is what should and could and should happen when things are done properly. No grout staining, no staining at all. Jobs are done on time. No headaches, no hassles, no residues and hazes and finger pointing and all that stuff. Again, it doesn't matter if it's tile or stone, commercial, residential. Everybody's happy, everybody gets paid. It's done once. Like I said, that's the goal for all of us. And again, so I hate showing the negative shots, but I like to show some of these too of going, there's a lot of great jobs that are done all day long. And again, that's why we're talking about this today, to make sure everybody knows what they may not know as of today. Maybe you pick up a few things you didn't know, or think through a few things that are going to be helpful to you and your business. So grout releases. So these are great for tile and stone, but grout releases are great for wood look porcelains, or the plank porcelains, obviously, that are popular still today, the stone looks. But even like this, where you've got obviously a contrasting color with some porcelain, unglazed porcelain tile, the use of a grout release. Now here, we're not talking about a sealer, we're talking about, typically it can be a sealer, but in the case here of grout release, these are typically film forming detergents or soaps or various materials that you roll on or sponge on, different ways that it can be done. Let it dry. and typically 15, 20, 30 minutes, and then you're grouting. So again, these are not sealers, but they are temporary barriers or film formers that allows the installer to do the job with the right open time and the working time and the characteristics that you're supposed to get from the grout, but also it does not allow for that staining that we've shown and talked about. And again, you see the during and after picture here. And that's what we want. We want to make his job as easy and profitable as we can, and without the headaches and hassles and all the meetings and why did this happen and whatnot, right? So what does the manufacturer recommend for installation? So again, something we want to talk about. Some manufacturers do go into detail about what they recommend for pre-sealing or the use of a grout release. Now here's a good shot of a commercial job where the picture on the left shows, obviously there's a lot of haze. What is that? It's not dirt, that's actual grout haze. And in the process of getting that off of there, there's a lot of washing, which is obviously, most of you know, is not a good thing. So not only did they get the haze off the tile, but the grout color was not supposed to be white or a very light gray. It was supposed to be more complementary. But again, in that process of trying to wash and scrub, not only did they still not get it all off of there, but we've now lightened the grout color, which is a separate issue. In the middle, where it's darker, that's where they were able to acid wash it and treat it and get it back to the look of the tile to what it should be. So again, can we fix it? Sure. Would have been cheaper and easier to prevent it with a grout release. Again, not a sealer, but in this case, as I mentioned, a grout release, because what's the picture on the right? That's the magnified texture of the picture on the left, about 160 or 180 times, something like that. It looks more like Velcro. I know a lot of amazing contractors, but I would submit, I don't know that there's any contractor that would be able to grout this job without the use of a grout release and not have a haze issue and potentially changing the color of the grout. So again, this doesn't speak to workmanship. This just speaks to what are the realities. When you have a natural texture of the tile that you see on the right picture, you have to treat that, and a sealer won't fix that. You have to be able to use, like I said before, with the golf club analogy, this should automatically speak to somebody and say, I need a grout release. I know I need to do something. I need a grout release, not a sealer. So again, trying to tie it all together. So what about microtexture? There's your picture right there, magnified with a jeweler's loop. You can see it. That's all the microtexture. That's grout in the tile. That's just a magnified picture of that. All those little pores, that grout will find a way in, especially if it's contrasting. Picture on the right, that again is a unglazed, unpolished porcelain wall, and a beautiful job with the exception of the grout haze. Now, can that be fixed? Absolutely, it can be fixed. For how much time and money and at what expense and who's paying for it? That's an unfortunate conversation to have, and something that would be cheaper, easier, and quicker to prevent by pre-sealing that particular tile. Or by using, in that case, you could also use a grout release on that as well. Either way with that tile, but again, we need to know what the texture is. But again, grout release are typically cheaper than sealers, so oftentimes guys will go to that. So again, a good option to go to. Lastly, grout wash water additives. So a lot of people aren't aware this is an option out there. These work primarily for cement-based grouts, polymer modified cement grouts, which again is mostly what we have today with cement grouts out there. They can work a little bit with some of your single mix component grouts, pre-mixed grouts, but they typically are designed to work kind of like an acid. They're not an acid, but they work like an acid. And they also work on the polymer, so it's kind of a dual chemistry type of approach. But these can be added to the rinse water to help cut down the number of rinses, but also to make the grout clean up quicker and easier without having to overwash and over scrub and do the things that we've shown. So again, it's an option. It doesn't mean this is what you need for every job, but again, like I said with the golf club, this is another club in your set there to say, is this a job where this is the best suited option? Maybe. Again, it's hard to say without testing and knowing all the things that we've talked about so far. This is just another arsenal in your kit here, or tool in your arsenal to use. So What they do there is, again, like I said, use less water, less likely to have the washed out grout or dishing and cupping of your grout joints, less rinses. Again, if I'm the guy grouting and I've been there, I've used these myself on families' jobs or people's jobs that I've installed tile. And again, for me, I don't want to be on my hands and knees longer than I have to. I don't want to have to do more rinses than I have to. I don't want to have to worry about having too much of a problem with the color of the grout, especially if they're mid or darker tone colors. Again, it makes it easier to clean. Everybody's happy, no callbacks. Again, this is what we're all looking for, right? So again, if you're not using or employing this as an option, again, I would ask you to look into it and just see, again, maybe it can help you with some of these jobs. Talk to the manufacturers, find out, do your own testing. So what's going on here? Again, we got tile, nice view. I think that's Jim's house there. I'm not sure on the left, but we'll go with that. Picture on the right, natural stone, beautiful job. Again, another beautiful tile job there. Beautiful stone job. Wish we were right there right now, but again, tile, stone. So what's going on here? What's going on there, as I said before, nothing. Everybody got paid, job's done right. Like I said, I like to try to show some of the beauty shots of the tile and stone. Like I said, not every job's a problem. I hate showing the negative stuff, but it does make the point of what we're trying to talk about today. Most of us are visual learners. We learn most from seeing things. And like I said, unfortunately, you have to show some of the bad to understand what it is we're talking about. But I also like to show the good. There's a lot of amazing installers. There's a lot of amazing products and materials. There's a lot of amazing people that you should be using as your resources that are free on job site inspections, technical service departments, websites. I mean, there's so much. The NTCA obviously is such a great resource that we're using today here to help put this on. So there's people and things you can do that, again, this can be, maybe not every job, but 99% of your jobs can be these. The jobs that are done once, everybody's happy, it's done on time, it's done on or under budget with no problems. And people are saying, man, I'd use that company again all day long. They're amazing. They know what they're doing. So again, I like to show those because that's also very much a reality of what's going on today in the industry. As I said before, just what I just mentioned, use your resources out there. Like I said, your technical departments, there are regional technical representatives that will go to your job sites and work with you to do product demos or to help you assess issues. Architectural, working again on details for submittals and CAD drawings and saying, taking the drawings from the TCNA handbook and saying, how do we marry this together? How do we explain this? Well, there are ARC reps out there that will gladly do that. Say, hey, man, I'd love to spend the time preventing an issue and making sure everything's done up front than having an issue afterwards and realizing there was things that we overlooked. Talking to your sales reps, like I said, websites, NTCA, the reference manual I again mentioned. There's so many things that we can utilize today to help us out to make sure that we don't have these issues. Please employ those. Those are virtually, again, those are all free. Trainings, education, trade shows. One day we'll be back at trade shows and sitting in warehouses like you see there at the NTCA road shows. And again, there's manufacturer trainings and things like that go on. Today, obviously, webinars are big. So use this free education like we're doing today. There's plenty of stuff out there to help you be profitable and successful. And so again, make sure you're using that to your benefit. So as we're wrapping it up there, like I said, knowledge equals success. To drive the profitability and the customer satisfaction, we have to know our materials and understand what the potential for staining or the inherent characteristics of the materials are and what methods and products we need to employ and use to make sure that the job's done once, successful, on time, or under budget. It doesn't matter if it's tile or stone. These are very much achievable. And again, and not just for the beauty shots as I showed you, there's many jobs that, again, will look that way 5, 10, 20 years later. If the proper care and maintenance is utilized in the beginning, but also with the maintenance on the end. These jobs look fantastic years to come. And like I say here, let's create more showcases. Again, stone, tile, doesn't matter. There's such a beautiful material out there. There's no wrong choice here. It's just a matter of knowing what we're doing and using those characteristics and those tools to our advantage, and explaining to our customers, this is what separates us from our competition, is knowledge, expertise. So let's utilize that and make sure that, again, we address all the questions and concerns. And with that, I'm going to wrap it up and turn it back over to Jim here for any question and answers. I'm going to thank you guys in advance for anybody that has to jump off here, but thanks for attending, and I'll be here for question and answer. I'm going to go ahead and try to set my camera up here, Jim. So go ahead. I'll turn it back to you.
Great. Hey, Rod, terrific information. And 3 words I take out of there to save money and make money for our industry, and that is know your product and finding out as much as you can and taking advantage of your manufacturers of setting materials and cleaning products such as Rod. Talk to them. Get all the assistance you can before you go into a job. Know what you're getting into. I think that's great information, Rod. Thank you. That was fantastic. We do have some information here, or excuse me, some questions here, and I know you can, fill us in on the Rod. Hi, Rod.
Yeah, I'm here. I've just got my headset on. That's the best way to hear you. So.
Well, I thought that was your hair.
That's about all the hair I have left. So a little bit here, just barely anything there.
Hey, by the way, that picture of my home, that was until I wake up in the morning. Until I wake up in the morning.
I thought that was your vacation home. No?
Yeah. All right. I know a lot of people make a lot of money in this industry, and people should be going into our industry and taking advantage of that. But here's some questions. Let's get back to reality here.
Yes.
One of our people here said, I always learn something from Rod. I especially like the expectations of the polymers causing picture framing after the enhancing sealer was applied. That knowledge alone is worth $1,000. So I just wanted to put that out there. I agree with that, and that's fantastic.
Yeah, all right. No, very, very good. Thank you.
So the information was so well put together and so well presented that we only have a couple questions here. What about the uneven grout discoloring weeks after drying out and right after getting wet for the first time, compared to right after wet?
So why the grout would shade or be uneven weeks later?
Yeah, right, discoloring.
So I mean, there's a lot in that, right? So you can address the issues of, how the grout was mixed, how it dried, are there windows, is there natural light coming in, right, in certain areas? I mean, I've experienced that in my first home that I had in California, where the grout over most of the house came out fine, but in my entry area where there was natural lighting in there, it ended up shading because of the summertime view and the differential of drying. And so again, it wasn't the grout, it was just one of those things. Now, when we talk about that, it's important to understand, are we talking about again, if we're going to use some of the industry jargon, it's 118.6 or 118.7 grout, right? So it's a standard cement grout, 118.6, which has a higher potential for discoloration just as it cures, or 118.7, which is your high performance cement grouts. Those grouts typically do not shade or discolor very easy. It takes a lot for those. They can, but it really takes a lot for those to discolor. So we need to understand what type of grout we're actually using. Now, one thing I will say as it relates to this presentation, like I said, it could be mixing issues, it could be curing from lighting or temperature changes, but it also can relate if you're having a natural stone or a porous tile. This is where I will, do a pitch to somebody. I don't care whose material you're using, is to use a more premium grout, the 118.7 grouts, because the material itself, if it's a porous body or bisque, or it's a natural stone, and you pre-seal the face of it, and you happen to get sealer on the side of the stone or the tile, that material where the sealer bled down into the joint on the side, as that grout, a regular standard performance cement grout, dries, the grout may tend to dry at a different rate, and you could end up having shading from that alone. So that's where sometimes guys will say, well, Rod, I did pre-seal and we ended up with shading. Why did that happen? And it's, again, the getting sealer on the edge of a stone or tile is not a bond breaker, but if you're using a 118.6 grout, a standard performance cement grout, it has a much higher potential for shading and discoloration, because as the grout dries at different rates, again, you can have variation. Now, it also could be if there's thin set bleed up into the joint, right? And we have different levels of thicknesses of grout because of thin set bleed up to the joint, that alone can cause grout to discolor. Like I said, the 118.7 or the higher performance cement grouts, you're much less likely to ever have an issue with those grouts for any of those reasons than you are with a 118.6 grout. There's so many things that could lead to those shading. But pre-sealing, to this presentation, that's one of the big areas. Like I said, is getting sealer on the edge is not a bond breaker, but it, you know, again, if it dries at different rates, you can end up having shade variation just by that alone. So I don't know what those particular issues are on that job, but those are just a few things to think about.
One other thing, Rod, overwashing when you're cleaning, right? Cleaning
No,
up.
yeah, which we talked about, right? Is, you know, like I said,
Right.
you know, it may come out completely even, like I showed the picture of the dark porcelain where the joints are now white. But obviously you can have, you know, again, jobs where it comes out just shaded by overwashing, exactly, or acid washing. You know, again, I still see a lot of people saying, I throw some vinegar. If I have grout haze, I throw vinegar in the wash water. And then we get the haze off with that. Well, that'll work, but that also can lead to other issues, including shade variation, if that's being used as your final wipe down or rinse down. So there's, again, tons of reasons that could happen.
All right, here's another question. Does the sacrificial grout release blend into the grout as the grout is being floated? Does it add any chemistry to the grout? Does it matter?
Great question. And that's why the key thing I said when I talked about grout release is that, again, we should hit on very quickly is you put it down, but it has to dry. So you don't put it down while it's wet, you grout. I mean, I see guys that will do that, and it's completely, honestly, a waste of time because it doesn't work. I mean, it has to dry. These grout releases have to form a barrier, a temporary barrier film. That has to be dry. Once it dries, no, it does not alter the chemistry, but that's why I also said they're detergents, if you will, soaps. I mean, that's, you know, again, just for simplicity without going into the chemistry too much. These are not sealers, so no, they do not change, but that's why the word grout release is so key, because yes, they don't change the chemistry, but do they improve the cleanability? Yes, because they're water soluble, right? So they come back and they aid in the cleanup of the grout. So they will make it easier to clean, but they do not adversely affect the color or the performance of the grout itself. But great question.
All right, good answer. We've had some slate get an enhanced look from epoxy grout, and the slate was pre-sealed. Is it recommended to use a good sealer? What sealers are recommended? They usually buy a premium sealer.
Well, so there's another great question with a lot to it because it sounds simple and easy. The thing I will tell you about sealers, and again, it does not matter whose sealer it is. When you're talking natural stone, it's not just a matter of saying, well, tell me, does water-based work better to solvent? The answer could be yes and yes. It depends on the chemistry and how well that marries with the mineralogy. How that happens with each product and each manufacturer, and when we also say slate, that's kind of a loaded term. Like I said before in the chart, you know, the chart gives you some definition and variation, but slate is not all slate. And how a particular water-based or solvent-based sealer, or whether it's a silicone-based product, whether it's a water-based fluoropolymer-based sealer, how those marry and interact with the chemistry or with the mineralogy of that particular slate will vary. So it's not just a matter of saying, well, I use company A sealer all the time and it should work the same on every stone or every material the same way. It doesn't work that way. That's why that mock-up and testing section is so key. because it could be that a particular water-based fluoropolymer sealer works the best. It could be that another manufacturer's polymer-based siloxane, a polysiloxane-based silicone works the best. That's why those tests have to be done, because there's no easy way to say it's this or it's that, or don't ever use this, only use this chemistry. You have to test and talk to, that's why I said talk to the manufacturer, do your own testing, but you don't have to do it on your own. Use the technical service departments. Oftentimes you can get free samples of product. Again, most manufacturers will sample stuff out to you, kind of like Sam's Club or Costco. Try it before you buy it. Most manufacturers will have sample bottles and things that you can use to test it out. So, because it can be an expensive investment. So we want to know that it's the right sealer. But there's no easy way to give a generic answer on that.
So her question was unique in that, explain to me how would epoxy grout give a enhanced look? What kind of, is that a chemical reaction or what is that?
It's the resin, and it's typically the pigment that's in there with the resin, right? That is going to absorb in. Remember the picture I showed of the limestone, which had the row down the middle that didn't, that stained? That's exactly what she's describing. Now, that can happen, obviously, if you don't pre-seal, but what can also happen is if we're not using the right sealer, and this is kind of hard sometimes for people to understand, is that even when you say, and she's saying they used a premium sealer, and again, so that, that's great, it's fantastic, but if that chemistry isn't the right one for the mineralogy of that stone, as much as I hate to say it, it's almost can be as if it didn't matter. It's almost it can react like you never had anything on there to begin with. So in other words, is the pigment and the resin staining the stone, despite having sealed it. If it's not the right sealer, you will not get the right bond and interaction and performance that you're expecting. And I would probably submit if you took that same sealer, took the same epoxy grout, put it on a granite or put it on another material, it would work fantastic. It's like, and maybe that was the case where they said, wow, we've never had an issue. But on that particular slate, it is an issue. So if the chemistry and mineralogy aren't a good fit, we can have a problem. And again, that can happen with almost any product that you have out there. And that's why natural stones can be a little more tricky than obviously tile, a man-made material, because natural stone's beautiful, but if you don't factor those things in, it can bite you.
So that's great. Mock-ups are interesting to me. So our trainers, they're doing their training events on the road, and mock-ups come up all the time. Mm-hmm. What do you think? How early should you do a mock-up in the process? I mean, when should you do that mock-up and present that to the end user, the building owner, the homeowner? What point of the program?
I mean, generally, it's at the time of the acceptance. Once the bid, you're the bidding contractor, and it's awarded, right? So at that point, we know the materials, we know what's in the spec if it is a spec job, right? Or if it's residential, again, at the point we understand, we know what the materials are, we know what the stone or tile is, what the grout or thin set used, or what, is this what type of job it is. Again, once everything's been done, awarded or finalized, whether it's residential, commercial, at that point we need to consider it. And especially, like I said, if it's something, you've used that material, that tile or stone before, and it is something that you've done a number of times and understand the conditions and the variables. And is it a remodel where we've got air conditioning and climatized application, and or is it a new job where again, we've got a number of other trades in a commercial job that are going to be trafficking painters and different people going across. I mean, all those things come into factor and come into play, right? So it's once we know all the variables are put in place and everyone's been awarded, or the materials are decided, and at that point is a conversation. Do we need a mock-up? How comfortable are you? Because like I said, not every job is going to allow you to do a mock-up for time's sake or whatever it might be, right? But whether you're the contractor or whatever your job is and the role is in that job, especially as a contractor, you're taking a calculated risk or liability of saying, I'm not going to do a mock-up, or hey, I don't want that liability. I want a mock-up. Now, if they don't want to do one, and you, again, it's one of those things you need to discuss. Because I've been in many discussions where people said, hey, there's no time for that. We don't have time. We got to go. We're moving, and there's just no time to do this. Well, again, that's something that you may want to, put in as a note in a contract, or again, note it on there that you recommended it, and there's a certain risk and liabilities with it. So every job is going to be handled a little bit different.
Well, Rod, you did a great job, very thorough, very well presented. You answered questions really well, and I think our audience really appreciated. I want to thank you, but I want to let everyone know that our next webinar is August 20th. Please look for an invite coming soon and register for it. There is always, as you saw today, a lot of information that's very helpful, and all of this information can help make you money, save you money, and make you a better installer. Rod, I really appreciate it. You have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks, everybody. We'll look forward to seeing you soon. All right.
Yep. Thank you, everyone. Take care.